Thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day and joining this webinar for the next 45 minutes or so. Great that you're with us. I'll just share my screen. There we go. So just some introductions to begin with. So the webinar will be around 45 minutes, and we welcome any questions from you. So if you'd like to put any questions in the chat at the side of the screen, then we'll get to those at the end. Also, we will be sharing with you the slides and the recording afterwards. So don't worry about having to scribble everything down. We will share that with you afterwards. Just to begin by introducing myself, so my name is Darren Wake, and I won't read all of the information about myself, but I've been working in customer experience for the last 14 years and helping companies with their VoC programs, particularly in making sure that the insights actually lead to action and things change for the actual customers, which is the most important thing. Working with a variety of sectors, but spending a lot of time with B2B organizations, helping them to satisfy customers and keep churn at an absolute minimum, which is kind of the real thing that we'll be talking about today, where we were looking at ways that B2B has some specific challenges. And one of the things B2B companies that we engage with continually want to do is understand things like what we see here. So understanding which customers are at risk, how satisfied are actual individuals within those business customers, and more importantly, what do you need to do to improve satisfaction? What do you need to do to keep them as clients? These are kind of the unique challenges that you face, because with B2B, you typically have a smaller number of clients than B2C. A lot of those clients might be worth an awful lot to the business. The cost of losing them can be quite serious. So having a really good VoC program that enables you to see exactly what your customers think and feel about you, and more importantly, that you guys take the necessary action to keep them satisfied and make sure that they keep you retain them as customers, and also those clients can grow as well over time, is key. So some of the other challenges are improving the actionability of VoC data. Research and feedback from customers can't just be interesting, it's got to lead to some sort of action on the back of it. And there's also going to be ways that you can engage your people internally, and how can you use that VoC data to make your actual customers happier too. So we've got some best practice approaches, what you can follow to try to ensure customer churn is at an extremely low level within the B2B space, and we have 5 steps to maximize retention using VoC. Going to go through each of the 5 in turn here and talk about some practical steps that I think we found that companies in your space can, if you follow these, then they definitely help make a difference to boosting retention. The first one is following what we call a VoC maturity audit to understand where you are now and how to progress along the audit. Now, we've developed a VoC program maturity model. Now, you can actually download this now, so hopefully you can see a pop-up where you can download this document. And this is something we devised at the start of the year, where we look at a VoC program and we developed it into 5 stages, from novice all the way through to best in class. And doing some research, we found that approximately 1 in 5 businesses are what we would call top performers with a strong or best in class VoC program in place. And around a quarter kind of on that left-hand side, where they're at that novice and foundational level. Now, I'll not go through every single detail on here. I'd encourage you to download that document and have a look at it. But it's kind of a blueprint to understand where you are now and how, in order to minimize churn and keep retention as high as possible, you kind of really need to be at that strong best-in-class level. And in terms of what defines where you are in that VoC maturity level, there's 14 attributes that we're listing on here. Again, I'll not go through every single one of them, but I would encourage you to look at each of these points and consider where you are as an organization. So looking at customer awareness, understanding customer journeys, what kind of VoC program do you have in place, going beyond surveys actually, because surveys, VoC isn't just surveys, it's other sources as well. prioritizing actions, taking actions, service recovery. There's lots of kind of attributes that define as to where you are on that VoC maturity level. And I think where we work with a lot of companies, we kind of want to look at these different elements and say, well, look, where are you now? And to kind of get to that right-hand side, best in class, these are the attributes you should be focusing on. That's kind of very much a kind of foundational piece, like an audit, to understand where you are at the moment and take a kind of a critical view of where your own VoC program is right now and how it can improve. The next step is perhaps one that's not particularly surprising, which is all about the importance of mapping your customer journeys, because this is really integral to getting a fully functioning VoC program, and also being able to collect feedback from customers at those key points that really are important to customers that you can follow up on and take action on. What exactly is a customer journey, or how is it best? How can it be used? And the way I like to define it is simply it's a framework which can enable you in 3 key areas. One is it's a framework that you can hang on insights, feedback, and control. That's very much kind of the VoC side of it. You can hang on scores and customer feedback onto that customer journey map. It can also aid you with service design and innovation. So thinking about the processes that you have and where there may be sticking points, and certainly your VoC data will help inform that, so to understand where those challenges are. And it can also be really useful for internal and external communications. So you can use that journey map with different audiences within the business to really say, look, these are our challenges in the customer journey. These are our challenges that our customers tell us from the voice of customer work, and that's where we need to refine things a little bit more. So it's way more than just something that's using it, putting your scores on. It can be shared, and it can really be used to design service improvements as well. So if we want to give it a bit of a clean definition, basically it's this: it's a diagram in order of the important touch points for a customer during a particular experience. Now, I think there's some key elements here. A diagram in order of important touch points. So really, what is it that a customer experiences and what is important to them? Now, an important point to make here is what a journey map is not. The journey map is not a process map. A process map is where you think about the methods of communication, the process a customer goes through to facilitate some sort of action. That is not a journey map. This kind of diagram, this picture, I think quite illustrates it quite nicely, where sometimes companies design a process, but the user experience is quite different. In this case, someone taking a shortcut across a route. However, the opinion the customer might have, they might blame you for the outcome, whether it's your fault or not. So just always engage with customers if you're going to do some journey mapping. It's best thing to do is ask a sample of customers to understand the process they go through. Don't just design it from your point of view. So in the B2B world, what kind of journeys would you map? Because there's several different types of transaction that you'd have, and these are just some example ones here, and there are going to be some ones that are relevant to your business, but they're typically things like new customer onboarding, the order of a product or service, deliveries of products in some cases, interactions with service or support center, and also periodic review or that whole account management process that happens in B2B. That's a journey in itself. What I'd encourage you to do when you're looking at journey mapping in B2B is look, rather than looking at the whole cradle to grave life cycle, which can contain many, many different journeys, try and break it down into stages like this. And then when you've broken it down into stages, you can then put steps within it. So here we have an example of a delivery journey, and there might be 4 distinct stages within it that the customer goes through. Now, what you really want to then do is hang VoC data, scores, and comments from customers onto that journey map itself. So here we have 4 different stages of the customer journey, and we can kind of see here an average score for satisfaction at each of those different stages. And the names underneath indicate comments from customers, that kind of qualitative feedback that comes across as well. And one thing you want to look at is some gap analysis. So where are the sticking points? Where are the problems? Because really the reason we want to do any of this is going back to the topic of this webinar is minimizing customer churn, is maximizing retention, putting out fires to stop customers thinking about looking elsewhere and going to competitors. And one thing that's really key is finding out what satisfaction levels are at those different stages in the journey and breaking down where the issues, and using the comments from customers to really understand what the specific challenges might be. Now, if you're just getting an overall satisfaction score in a relationship survey, for example, like an annual satisfaction survey, the score will mask individual journeys and it will mask individual touch points within those journeys. So you might be missing a trick that's really important, but it's not being surfaced in those kind of more infrequent data collection methods that are not used at the key points in the journey. We could have spoke about journey mappings for a full half day in its own right, so that's kind of a high level overview. But this is probably one of the most overlooked areas in ensuring that you have a best-in-class VoC program that can deliver extremely high retention. And that is all about giving feedback a great experience for customers. Now, sadly, all too often we see examples where we call it problems with the traditional approach, where surveys are too long with irrelevant questions. This particularly happens with those kind of annual relationship surveys where it takes 5, 10, 15 minutes to complete. That is way too long. There's a real lack of people just don't have the kind of bandwidth to allocate that amount of time to surveys any longer. So there's a real barrier there that customers often abandon those long surveys. They just contain irrelevant questions or they're asking about things that happened way too long ago. So if a customer's gone through a journey stage and it happened way back when, 6, 8 months ago, they're just not going to recall that event clearly enough to give you the insights that you need. Lack of personalization is a factor as well. Bad timing. One thing we do say is you should be asking for feedback at the points where customers have just experienced that event. That's when things are fresh in their mind, and that's when they've got things they want to share with you, because it's just happened at that point. If you're asking them months later, it's too late. Particularly in B2B, one issue, I'll come back to this in a moment, but is one survey to one customer, not considering the wider team. And in the B2B landscape, it's really critical that you think about getting opinions from all stakeholders within a given client. So you'll have many different people that you deal with, and just getting feedback from one person is frankly the wrong approach. You need to be collecting feedback from lots of different people across that decision-making unit, not just one person. Another problem is data goes to the wrong people or it doesn't reach the right people. So by that, I mean that feedback comes in, it goes to a customer experience team or an analyst team, and it never reaches the front line. Those insights never get to the account manager or the delivery people or the people in the service center that actually are at the coalface dealing with that client. That it's kind of kept in a silo, and that's kind of the wrong way to do it. And finally, there's very little follow-up. It's an afterthought at best, rather than it being kind of put in as business as usual. Again, I'll come back to this point. So to summarize how to make giving feedback a better experience for customers, ask for feedback when customers are likely to have feedback they want to give you, which goes back to understanding the customer journey. Once you've mapped that journey, you'll identify the important touch points where it makes sense to want to get feedback. And they're the points where it's important to ask for it. Second point, making it really easy for customers to give feedback. So avoiding long surveys, they've got to be short, to the point. Customers should be able to complete them in 20 to 30 seconds. They shouldn't have to it drives us mad when we see companies saying complete our short 5-minute survey. That is not a short survey. That's actually a really painful customer experience. If you're getting feedback at those key points in the journey and asking them about what's relevant at that point, you can ask it 3 or 4 questions. You know, how satisfied were they with 3 or 4 areas? Get an open box question to ask how you could improve, and that's it. And this is a way to maximize response rates as well. And the third key area is responding appropriately to feedback, which I'll come on to in a moment. Why better? Short surveys, relevant questions. We can include some personalization in there as well. And this goes back to understanding the audience, where if you're not just sending a generic vanilla survey to one client, but you're sending different surveys to different people, then we can have a degree of personalization in there as well. The outcome is a higher response rate, higher quality insights, and the real-time data where you can find and fix those problems quickly. I'll also revisit this, but I'm talking about where the data goes to and ensuring it isn't just in a silo that is kept within the CX team. It should really be going out to the people at the front line who can influence that relationship. And that kind of follow-upping means you improve satisfaction, not merely measure it. I just wanted to focus on understanding the B2B customer in more detail, because it is very different to B2C relationships. And as well as doing the journey mapping, I'd encourage you to look at this. So who is involved in your B2B relationships? You know, from the client side, typically it might be several different people with different roles, responsibility and seniority. Now, they all have, to a lesser or greater extent, a relationship with yourselves. Now, we would argue that you should be collecting feedback from all of these people, maybe at different stages of the journey for when it's relevant. But it's important to understand their level of influence and not ignore the key people. So beware just gathering feedback from certain people or junior people, or just the person it's easier to get feedback from. We've seen it before where you could fall into a trap of getting really high scores from a client because you're only asking one person, but then it could be a complete blind spot that client is at risk because you're just not getting the feedback from a key stakeholder, a more senior person, the person that signs the checks, the person that makes the decisions. And what's really key here is that the reports and the insights that you derive from those people, they're split not just by client, but by individual. And therefore, the action plans you take, the priorities for improvement that you need to take, should not just be split by a client, but also by an individual as well. Just some examples of reporting here. So this is a screen from the CustomerSure platform where we're seeing satisfaction scores by person for each client. So an organization here where 15 people have submitted feedback from that organization. But then you can see a wide spread of scores. So some people might be seeing, you know, NPS for 10, and other people are detractors. Insightful in itself, but if your key people are the ones that are the detractors, then that might be a real red flag. But if you're only getting the feedback from the small number who are very satisfied, you might really be missing a trick there. The other thing to think about when you're analysing VoC data is what are the trends for each customer in each topic area. So if you're getting feedback from, in this case, 15 people in that one client over time, how is that fluctuating? How are the KPIs changing, whether it be NPS or CSAT or effort score, but also how are they rating you in these key theme areas like communication, friendliness, quality, responsiveness? whatever areas are important to them when they deal with you, you need to have your finger on the pulse to really understand if there's a risk of these clients staying or going elsewhere. Finally, what I'd encourage you to do from a B2B reporting point of view is produce a client satisfaction league table. So this is something that's taken from the CustomerSure platform here, where we can see, in this case, NPS by client. And again, this could be by individual or all contacts within that client. And if your key clients are down at the bottom of that league table, then that's a real red flag in itself. And also look for trends or shifts. So if these people used to be top box in the for the KPIs and they've suddenly dried down, then that's kind of a red flag that something's going a bit wrong there, that you probably need to get involved and try to recover the relationship. The next piece I'm going to focus on is extremely important, but all too often it's kind of missed or overlooked, and it's that realm of service recovery. We talked a little bit earlier about the traditional approach for collecting feedback. Now you might see a poll's just appeared on your screen here, because we're just interested to find out how often people follow up and respond to customers after they give feedback. Traditional approach, very much surveys are pushed out to customers, the customers complete the surveys, and that goes back to the analysts and they produce the reports, and then ultimately sometime later that results in some process improvements that will feed back to customers, which is great. And that kind of general process still stands as the right thing to do. However, what it neglects is this stage here, which is really, really critical. And this is something that we encourage you to kind of consider and put in place as well, where feedback not only goes to the analysts for understanding what the key trends are, but also it goes back to that frontline team as well. So that frontline team, whether it's the account manager or customer service person, that the feedback from that customer is immediately visible in real time to that person that has that relationship. And if necessary, service recovery takes place. Now, feedback generally falls into kind of different buckets, if you like. So often feedback is everything's fine, everything's going along as it should. However, it would be great if you did X, Y, or Z. That kind of longer term actionable insight, which is very valuable. However, often customers give feedback, and this happens a lot if you're doing it in the right way at the key points in the customer journey as well, where people are telling you, well, something didn't quite work well for them, or something failed to meet their expectations, or we ordered something, or it was late, or no one got back to us, or that we've got an issue here. Now, in the traditional model, if that data just goes straight to the analysts, it can often be missed and picked up months or weeks later. But if you have alerts where it goes to the people that can action that feedback straight away, they can do that whole service recovery piece. And then that's what we call the whole closing the loop element, where feedback comes in and then the people can then deal with that feedback and put out the fires. And there's all sorts of ways that we can then evolve this. So for the customer service person or account manager, they can have kind of an agent dashboard to view feedback and scores from their own clients, which they find really useful, which can inform broader KPIs as well. Now, sometimes people think, oh, goodness me, that sounds great, best practice, that when we get feedback, it's important to do that service recovery and follow up. But people can often think, will we be overwhelmed? How on earth will we be able to do this? And the key thing is it can be done, and done extremely well, by simply prioritizing who to respond to. And there's a few practical things you can do, like automatically assigning feedback to teams and colleagues to pick it up. So with a correct kind of VoC platform in place, then feedback can automatically be routed to these teams and colleagues to do that follow-up. And there's something else to consider, which is whether you have automated or personalized responses to those follow-ups as well. And things like customized survey thank you pages can be really useful to give a bit of a, it's something we have in the CustomerSure platform where when people have completed the survey, they could have a bespoke thank you page. So if people are very satisfied, they see something which is slightly different to people who are dissatisfied. So often if people are very satisfied, we can try and direct them to a review page to leave a review. Or if they're very dissatisfied, they see something different where it's kind of apologizing for the situation and someone will pick it up in response to it. Now, the bit about why should we do this? What difference will it make? Well, quite simply, we've seen it happen many, many times. It just blows the customer's socks off because it's so seldom done that then they give feedback and they get the response. It's a real kind of, goodness me, I've taken time to give feedback, they've read it, they're doing something with it, they've responded to put things right and acknowledge it. Immediately, it means it's a better customer experience for them. And also it means the next time you ask them for feedback at another survey, another point in the journey, they're more likely to respond. If over time they give you feedback and they get radio silence back, then you'll really struggle to maintain high response rates. People will just think, what's the point? It goes into an empty space and they never get any response back. The final piece really is service improvement, which is all about prioritizing actions and actually taking actions. Now, service recovery is you're getting feedback from people and you're putting out fires, you're responding back to them to make things right, which is kind of one of the real critical factors for influencing recommendation and retention. Interestingly, actually, I've just to revisit the poll, thanks guys for responding back to that. 50% of people said they always follow up and respond to customer feedback, which is brilliant. That's great. So well done, guys, those of you doing that. And around kind of a quarter are doing it sometimes, and about a tenth occasionally. So that's quite insightful in itself. Thank you for responding to that. Those guys who are doing it consistently, then that's brilliant work. Yeah, just kind of encourage you to keep that going. So when we're looking at service improvements and taking action that matters, this is where there's a change of mindset required, because we see this a lot in all sectors, not just across in B2B sectors, but where CX teams are kind of stuck in a bit of a cycle of data collection, doing lots of analysis and insights, but doing very little action that matters. So this is kind of that left-hand side, where most of the effort is in that kind of machine of quest for data. Let's send more surveys, let's analyze more data, but really do very little with it. And we would argue it should be kind of flipped on its head, really, where data collection leads to more analysis and insights that leads to more actions that matter. Because ultimately, what you want to get to is this here, where customers won't experience any difference unless something changes. So we have another poll just here, actually, which is, do you know what your priorities for improvement are? And thank you if you're able to just respond to that poll as well. One thing we do working with our clients is taking the VoC data and producing the insights will then enable us to then say, right, what your priorities for improvements are, what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and where do you need to focus your efforts, both at an overall level for all clients, but also individual action plans. And particularly prevalent in the B2B space, where we're saying you've got a big client here, and because we're getting that regular heartbeat of feedback across the customer journey, across the different people in your clients, not just one person, then goodness me, there's 3 or 4 key actions that we need to take to not just put out fires, but longer term increase satisfaction, which will reduce churn and reduce that risk that they go elsewhere. So what are your top actions, and what I'll come on to a moment of how we can understand, how we can derive what those top actions are and work out what we should do. Service improvement and service recovery. So doing just one alone isn't ideal. If you're just doing service improvement longer term, that's great. However, if you're not doing the service recovery of putting out those fires when people give you that feedback, that's a real issue. Now, what's great is there's been real leaps and bounds in AI and technology, and we use AI and technology within our platform to help identify the CX priorities for improvement. So taking the comments, taking the scores, and once upon a time when I started in CX research, it was reading lots of comments, a lot of manual work to analyze the data, read the comments, to pull out the themes and the topics we need to focus on to improve. Thankfully, AI and technology has shortcut so much of that now, and we can now use that to identify what those actions need to take. Now, the actions you take should benefit all and individual customers. So there'll be things that you do which can benefit everyone, and there's also things that can benefit just individuals. So how do you identify those priorities for improvement? Well, there's kind of a chain of things here, where getting VoC data, which is essentially feedback from customers, which incidentally surveys is primarily the source of VoC data, but not the only source. Other sources could well include your complaints data, internal data of when customers are contacting you, anything that's in the review space. So if people are leaving opinions elsewhere, that's all voice of customer as well. Using tools to identify what the insights are, so quantitative and qualitative analysis to pick out what the key trends are within that data, which can then identify what the issues are and what are the opportunities. So issues is obviously where there's problem areas, so where the comments and the scores illustrate the sticking points and where you need to improve. But also look for opportunities in there. So we've worked with many B2B customers where, looking at the comments, we've been able to identify cross and upsell opportunities, new ways that you can communicate with clients to help them as well. So there's more than, as well as finding out where there's issues, there's also some actions that you can take to possibly sell more with that client or increase recommendation. Getting the possible actions, I'll come to a moment how we can derive those actions and putting them into some prioritization tool, taking the actions and then review and measure. Now, bear in mind that if you make changes, if you identify a priority for improvement and that changes behavioral or process or system, there will be a time lag for that to manifest itself in your satisfaction scores. Now, that time lag typically might be a month, it might be a couple of months. So don't expect immediate an uptick in scores necessarily. Uncovering the insights from VoC data and how to do this. Now, there's various tools that we'd recommend. So one is driver analysis, which I'll just talk to ever so briefly here, which is correlation reports, where we're looking at satisfaction scores for individual topics or areas, and how does that correlate with your KPIs. And your KPIs might be Net Promoter Score or CSAT, and this can help identify which has the biggest bang for its buck. So there might be a low scoring area, there might be two low scoring areas, and then if one has a high correlation with your KPIs and the other has a weaker correlation, the one with a higher correlation is the one you should perhaps focus on most. Topic analysis. We're now using text analytics in CustomerSure and AI to analyze all text comments to understand what are the topics in there and what are the sentiments. Now, this is increasingly important, and thankfully through to technology, it's easier than ever to do this, because in one comment, people saying, how could you improve? They'll typically might mention 3 or 4 things. Your product's great, your people are fantastic, but there's a real issue with deliveries, they're always late. So in a comment like that, they're covering 2 or 3 different topics, and some are positive, some are negative. It's important you unpick those. Root cause analysis is all about understanding the cause of things further down the line. So if someone experiences a particular issue early on, how does that manifest itself later in the relationship? And there's some ways that we can do that by looking at scores in a journey and how that varies over time. Another thing to consider is overall scores, but also by individual customer segments. So it might be by industry or size of client or customer bandings as well. And in terms of prioritizing the actions you need to take, we would argue, look at the customers who are most important to you. So who are your biggest clients, and what are they saying, that, and what are the priorities that they would like to see you take. I'll just go back to the poll, actually. Thank you guys for responding back to that, which was, do you know what your priorities for improvement are? Around a third said they always know what their priorities are, which is great. Just over a third again, most of the time, and the other third, some of the time, what their priorities for improvement are. Okay, great. Interestingly, no one said that they never know what their priorities should be to focus on, which is welcome news. Just something I'd like to share with you, which is a very simple prioritization tool example, where when you go back to this stage and you identify what the issues and what the opportunities are, would encourage a bit of from again the analytics, from the actions that tools that we can provide, from the AI, and also brainstorming amongst your teams as to what you could possibly do. I'd say at that point, there's nothing off radar. Everything's possible that you could actually do. But you should put it into some sort of tool like this, which enables you to prioritize the actions you could take for service improvement. And this is extremely easy, a simple table, but I've used it a number of times and it works really well from those brainstorming sessions where you have a number of ideas, and then we score them based on these different characteristics, and we give them a score between 1 and 5. So what's the impact on the customer for doing this? What's the impact on the business, your business? The cost of doing it, is it going to be cheap or is it expensive? How much time is involved to make this change? How much resources is needed from your point of view to make it happen? And is it easy or hard to do? And just giving it a score for each possible idea, you can then rank that to identify, well, what's the quick fixes? What's the low-hanging fruit? So one priority for improvement might be, goodness me, our CRM isn't fit for purpose. We really need to get more of this data into our CRM or overhaul the CRM. Now, that might be a really sensible thing to do, but it could be costly. It could take a lot of resources. It could take a lot of time. But another thing might be, okay, we've got an issue with late deliveries to our customers. So how about we start sending email or SMS alerts to our key contacts in our clients to tell them this is happening? Now, that might be something that's a lot easier to do, takes less resources, so that's can be scored accordingly. And also thinking about who the owners are. And when you've done something like that, it helps give some clarity on the actions you guys can take. I just wanted to conclude really before we move on to some questions about how we help clients. So we have many business-to-business customers, and they use the CustomerSure platform to measure and improve satisfaction at those key points in the journey. And we collate all of that analysis and produce real-time analytics and dashboards to give them that real finger on the pulse as to what customers are saying and enable all of that segmentation. Things like customer journey mapping reports, and regardless of which VoC platform you use, I'd encourage you to look at satisfaction across the journey. So on the left-hand side here, there's a chart illustrating CSAT scores at those key points in that journey over time, and how is that changing. And if you were to look at that by customer segment or by an individual client, you'll get a real transparent view as to where your focuses should be. And also then looking at trends of the scores over time. I've mentioned a few times, and you've probably heard it lots of times from events and just time on LinkedIn, the growth in AI and text analytics, and the new ability this has provided in the VoC landscape is truly huge. So one thing we're doing now is using AI to analyze high volumes of text comments, to put them into topics and subtopics. So what are people referencing, assigning a score to comments, assigning whether it's positive or negative, and then putting all of that insight in together to produce a kind of an AI insight of whatever that area might be, and also derive action plans. So yes, looking at the data and analyzing it yourself is very important. However, the new kind of AI tools that are out there now that we use within the platform enable that action plan to literally be delivered on a plate and not just by topic, but also by client. So if you've got a specific action plan for your biggest B2B customers, then that's really insightful in itself. So just to summarize what we've covered today, so each of these 5 areas, we could talk about these in greater length, and there's a button actually on the screen if you'd like to book a call with us, because we're very happy to chat about each of these areas in more detail, particularly the VoC maturity audit, where there's quite a process to understand where you are now and how to progress and why that's important, and we have some of the resources we can share with you there. Mapping the customer journeys is really key to understand what are the key touch points across all of your journeys, and that will help you identify where you should collect feedback through a structured VoC program. Once you've understood where you collect that feedback, it's key to look at making that feedback process a great experience for customers. Sadly, we see way too many surveys which are too long, irrelevant questions. They're sent out too long after the event. So if you're asking questions about deliveries and they got the delivery last week or 2 weeks ago, it's too late. They need to get that the next day or the same day. Service recovery, it's great that you guys in the poll said that predominantly you are doing that consistently. It's key just to ensure that when people give feedback that needs an act response, that you're doing that consistently. If people are giving feedback and they hear nothing back, then response rates will drop, but more importantly, that those cries for help will be ignored. And finally, service improvement. So prioritizing actions and taking them. And the other thing I stress there is that prioritization of what actions to take, because often clients say to us, goodness me, there's so much we could do. Where do we start? Where do we prioritize? And we'll say, okay, let's look at what we could do. Is it behavioral? Is it a process? Is it a system? And how easy is it to make it happen? Some of them might be just a training need. So let's communicate with HR, let's communicate with the training teams. And we then say to our contact center staff, our account managers, our delivery drivers, whoever it might be, look, guys, you're doing a great job. However, can you just ensure you're doing A, B, and C? Because it's important to our customers. They value it. And it's important that we do that work. The final point I'd add to service improvement as well is broader closing the loop, which is the whole you said we are doing, you said we have done context. So not just doing that one-to-one with customers, but doing it collectively with a broader bunch of customers as well. Questions. Let me just have a look. We've got a couple of questions here, guys, in the last couple of minutes we have. So how best to share insights across the business? So one thing we think is really key is when you have those insights, feedback from customers, is create a bit of a brand or a topic that you can then, that you can communicate those results consistently, because where it works really well is I've seen internal brands called Our Customer's Voice or Our Customer's Say, and create a bit of a brand, a bit of theatre around it, and then say to your departments, look, guys, we're doing the VoC program. We're collecting feedback at these points in the customer journey. Now, we're going to communicate with you monthly or put it on the intranet or periodically, not just the scores, but also it needs to be relevant for them. So what do they need to do differently tomorrow? So relevance is also key. And having those kind of voice of the customer engagement sessions with those departments. So getting time in their diary to say, look, guys, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of the results. You know, don't bore them with chart after chart, but literally saying, look, here are the KPIs, here are the scores on the doors, and here are the prioritized actions we need to take. So kind of face-to-face meetings, a branded campaign with regular heartbeat of communications to those departments. And also, how should you communicate insights and results back to your customers is another question. I would also advocate kind of that regular, I've seen some really great ways of particularly in B2B environments where videos are a great way of doing it. Get someone senior within the business to do a video where they're saying, thank you. We really, as customers, we really value your feedback. We really value understanding what you think and feel about us and how we can constantly improve to make things better for you. This is an overview of what you've told us in the last 6 or 12 months. Here's how we're doing. This is what we've fixed and what we've improved. And this is what we'll do next to make things even better. And that kind of video going out to your customers, either, sent to everyone or just handpicked customers, is a great way to demonstrate that you're listening and you're taking action. So videos are kind of one way, but also giving them, I always think being transparent is really good. So, I mean, if you've got scores or trends you'd like to share, I would encourage you to share those with clients as well, with your customers. And also saying, I see that you raised a point about A, B, and C. Well, rest assured, we're now working on doing these things to put things right for you. And another question was just about how should we prioritize, which things should we prioritize to fix? I think one thing to look at is looking about being pragmatic and how easy are the things that you could work on. So you could work on several different things, and what I'd say works best is having a blend of things. It's no use every priority for improvement, the service improvement stuff being things that it's going to take 6 months for a customer to notice. That's no good. You kind of need some things that are quick wins and actionable now that you can take on and roll out. So they tend to be the behavioral stuff that people on the front line dealing with customers can implement straight away. So some examples might be people who visit, showing an ID badge, clarity of communication, agreeing next steps in more detail with clients when you've agreed them, keeping promises and commitments. Because one of the key priorities for improvement we see an awful lot in the B2B environment is around communication, keeping customers informed, keep them informed where they are in the loop, telling them what's going to happen next. And I think having a process where you're doing that consistently through not just calls, but emails and face-to-face is a quick win as well. I'm conscious of time, and I think I've just actually slightly overrun. So I'd just like to conclude by saying thank you very much for taking time out of your busy day to join us for this webinar. And thank you for your contributions in the polls and the questions. They were really interesting. We will share the recording and the slides with you, so they'll follow later today. And we'll do several more of these webinars in the future as well as we go into these topics in greater detail, and we'll inform you about these, and we'd love you to come along to more. The final thing to note is, as you would expect, we value your feedback. So we will send you a feedback form later today for you to just give us some feedback on the webinar, what you liked and what you'd like us to see more of in future, any topics you'd like us to talk about in greater detail. Any feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for your time and attention, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.